Mirza Hashem. Till Me'ev Esm Shonim Tovos. All right, we'll say good morning. Let's begin. So we're going to pick up in Mirza Hashem on the top of Samech Tes. Today's Daf is Samech Tes. We're going to pick up on Samech Tes. Again, our shir is sponsored by the Schoenfelds in memory of Barry Plotkin, Baruch Yosef Ben Meir HaKohen. We hope that in the merit of Shiva is being observed now. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, his neshama will have an aliyah. So we left off on top. We're actually continuing a conversation that was begun yesterday. We began to discuss this idea of the Kohanim sleeping on top of their clothing, and whether or not that constituted a type of hana'ah which was permitted or prohibited. So the Gemara said, Shamas poshtin umekaplin manichin oson tachas roshin. The Kohanim take their clothing, they take off their clothing at night, they fold it up and they put it underneath their head using it as a pillow. So the Gemara says, Shamas mina big day kohanim nitno lehanos pen. We see from here that you are permitted to get benefit from the big day kohuna. That Kohanim are permitted to get benefit from their big day kohuna. Amar Papa, lo tema tachas roshin ela ima kineged roshin. So Papa says, no. Don't read it as underneath their heads, but rather read it as next to or opposite their heads. And the Gemara says, Amara Misharshia, Shamis Mina, Tfilin min atzad Shapir Dami. What do we see from here? That tefillin on the side is appropriate. So what does that mean? Also, take a look at Rashi. Shema Mina, midemuter lahanichon etzlo, lo chayish l'shem yafiach. Rabbi say, what's the whole issue when sleeping? So we spoke about last night that the issue with sleeping really seems to be flatulence on the point when one is asleep. So we see from here that having the big day kahuna in close proximity to you while you're sleeping, we're not concerned that one will undermine the sanctity of the big day kahuna. So the Gemara says you also see from here that tefillin min atzad. Rashi says lahanichan es l'kishuyoshin. We see from here the fact that you could sleep next to big day kahuna also indicates that you could sleep next to tefillin, and that there's no lessening of the kedusha of having the tefillin in close proximity to you while you're sleeping. So Gemara says hachanami mistabra the keneged roshen. So also the Gemara just backs up this assertion. It would seem to be that indeed the case that we are referring to here is not a case of where one has actually put the tefillin underneath. One has put the big day kuna underneath their heads, but rather next to their heads. Because if you think that they're literally sleeping on top of the big day kahuna, then teifukle mishum kilayim. Oh, there's another problem. What's the other problem with sleeping on top of big day kahuna? A shatnez issue. Now also the Gemara says the ha'ika avneit, because remember there is the belt, and the belt of the kohen. This is talking about again this regular kohen, and the belt of the regular kohen is shatnez. Look at Rashi. Hanicha. Excuse me, I'm sorry, we're not up to that Rashi yet. So the Gemara says the following. So, the ha'ika avneit, unihinami denitnu lehanos bahen, hamis hani mikilayim. So I'll say, even if you want to say that lemaisa, again, you are permitted to get benefit from big day kahuna, everyone agrees that what? You may not get benefit from kilayim, from shatnez. So even if you want to say big day kahuna nitnu lehanos man, that you are permitted to get benefits from big day kahuna. And again, when we say get benefit, everyone agrees, by the way, that benefit, of course, will be limited to the kohanim themselves. But lemaisa, again, no one will say that you're permitted to get benefits from shatnez. To which the Gemara says, well, hani chalamanda amar avneto shel kohen gadol zehu avneto shel kohen hedjot. So I will say, this works. Now, again, the Gemara just made an assumption that the clothing of the kohanim is a kohen, a pasha of the kohen, a regular kohen, is shatnez. And what shatnez of it? It's not the actual, it's the belt. That the belt itself has a mixture of wool and linen. So the Gemara says, well, just understand, not everybody agrees with that. Hani chalaman da amra avneto shel kohen gadol, zeu avneto shel kohen hedjot. This makes sense according to the opinion who holds that the belt that the kohen gadol wore on Yom Kippur is the belt that a regular kohen wore throughout the year. So we'll say, let's look at Rashi for just a moment over here. So apparently, so the one who says that we're not concerned about kilayim, and the only concern in this whole discussion is whether or not you are permitted to get benefits from clothing up from big day kahuna. This makes sense according to the Mandamar Hanicha Rashi. The opinion who is not concerned for kilayim. Leman da'amar avneto shel kohen gadol b'yom kippurim shehu shel butz that he says that the belt, the Kohen Gadol that he wore that was just made of linen, Zehu Avneto Shal Kohen Hedjot, Zehu Shavneto Shal Hedjot, Shal Yemos Hashana, Ve'ein Kalayim B'Bigdei Kohen Hedjot Shapir. So I will say, listen to this. So remember, let's just follow the progression of this conversation. So the way this whole thing began is we were trying to figure out, the Mishnah made a statement that the Kohanim take off their clothing at night and put it underneath their head. So this triggered a whole conversation that, does that mean that you could get benefits from the big day kuna? So the Gemara reached the point where the Gemara essentially said, you know what, you're right. They're not really putting the big day kuna underneath their heads. They're putting the big day kuna next to their heads. And therefore there is no direct contact, and therefore no direct benefit from the big day kuna. So the Gemara says, well, 1 second. Even the fact that we can entertain the idea that you'd be putting the big day kahuna underneath their heads, what do you do about the shatnez problem? Because after all, isn't the belt of the kohen hedjot shatnez? And by putting it underneath your head, are you not getting benefit from shatnez? To which the Gemara says, well, just understand whether or not it's shatnez is subject to dispute as well. So the Gemara says there's an opinion that says that the belt that the Kohen Gadol wore on Yom Kippur was the belt that the regular Kohen Hedjot wore throughout the year. Now we'll say, remember, what did the Kohen Gadol wear on Yom Kippur? All white linen, which then indicates that the belt that the Kohen Hedjot wore throughout the year was also only white linen. So therefore, again, if that's the case, then it would not pose a shatnez problem. El leman da'amar avneto shel Kohen Gadol, lo ze avneto shel Kohen Hedjot. But according to the opinion who says that the belt of the Kohen Hedjot, according to the Madama who says that the belt of the Kohen Gadol was not the belt of the Kohen Hedjot, because the Kohen Hedjot had a belt of both wool and linen. What is there to say? Because also when we say what is there to say, meaning does that not pose a shatnez problem? But remember again, we had this machlokis about the belt all the way in the beginning of the Masechta, about what was the nature of the belt of the Kohen Hedjot. Okay. So the Gemara says, "V'chi teima kilayim b'levish." Well, maybe you'll say. So we'll say again. So now what we're saying is, this may pose a kilayim problem, but it only poses a kilayim problem according to the one who says that there's a kilayim problem. Right? So again, it's only if you hold that the belt of the Kohen Hedjot was not the belt that the Kohen Gadol wore on Yom Kippur, then you have a kilayim problem. So the Gemara says the following: "V'chi teima." Well, maybe you'll say like this: "V'chi teima kilayim b'levisha." I'll give you another answer. Maybe you'll say, well, the Isser Kilayim is wearing something. But over here, remember, the Kohen would not be wearing something. What would he be doing? He'd be resting his head on top of it. Look at Rashi for just a moment. Rashi says, actually not yet, I'm sorry. So the Gemara says, V'hatanya, but that's not true. V'hatanya. Lo ya'ale alecha, aval ato mutar lahatzio tachtecha. So we'll say, listen to this. The Torah, when it phrases the prohibition of shatnez, uses the lashon of lo ya'ale alecha. The pasuk is ubeged kilayim shatnez lo ya'ale alecha. Now lo ya'ale alecha literally means it shall not come upon you, which seems to the Gemara seems to understand this as that the Isser Kilayim is wearing a garment in such a way that you wrap it around you. So the Gemara says lo ya'ale alecha. But Rabbosai, technically speaking, you could lay down on a sheet of shatnez. So why? Why would that be? Because again, that's not considered to be lo ya'ale alecha. It's not on you. You're on top of it, but it's not on you. So the Gemara says, but the rabbi stepped in and said, Asher la'asos king. The rabbi stepped in midrabbanon. You can't even lay down on shatnez. Why? Because there's a concern that although you're laying down on top of shatnez, what may you end up doing? Literally translated, it means that one thread may wrap itself around you. So you both say sometimes when you lay down on something, it's not that crazy that you would end up wrapping yourself in it as well. So midda oraisa, you could only issue of shatnez are on things that you put on. Because again, it's derech, what we call derech levisha, a way you wear a garment. Midrabanon, even laying down on shatnez will be problematic. So the Gemara says, so we'll say, therefore, in this case over here, even putting your head on top of shatnez would be problematic. V'chitema demaf siklei. We'll say, page samich tes amodalet, first wide line. V'chitema demaf siklei midi beini ubein. Maybe you'll say that you won't lay down directly on the big day kuna, but instead what? You'll put something in between yourself and the big. So there'll be another material in between you and the big day kuna. V'hamar Rab Shimon ben Pazi, Amar Rab Yoshua ben Levi. Amar Rebbe Mishum Kehila Kedosha de Yerushalayim. Afilu Eser Matzos Zu Al Gav Zu. Even if you have literally 10 mattresses, one on top of the other, Vikilayim Tachtehen, and there's kilayim all the way underneath on the bottom, Aser Lishan Aleim. You still can't sleep on it. Meaning, I will say again, the Isser D'Rabbanan is such that you cannot sleep on top of any Isser Kilayim. That's the point. Can't sleep on, even if there are multiple layers separating between you and the Kilayim. So therefore, again, I will say, in this case, the Big Day Kahuna, even if you were to put another material between yourself and the Big Day Kahuna, it would still be problematic. Elalav Shmamina Keneged Rashehen Shmamina. But rather, again, what do you see from here? You see from here that Lamaisa, it must have been that the Kohanim were not sleeping on top of the Big Day Kahuna, but rather what? The Big Day Kahuna were next to them. And therefore, again, I also remember the whole issue was an issue of flatulence. So now the Gemara seems to say, we're not concerned for that. We're not concerned for that. Therefore, again, halacha l'maisa, the Kohanim would not sleep on top of the Big Day Kahuna, they would be folded up next to them. Shmamina. Ravashi Amar, Ravashi says, I'll say something interesting. So right after the Gemara seems to close it down, Gemara says, Ravashi says, well, maybe not. The Olam Tachas Rashayan, right? No, in reality, it's possible they slept on top of the Big Day, meaning with their heads on top of the Big Day Kahuna. The Hakam is hiding the Kilayim. But what about the fact that it's possible that there's Big Day Kilayim, that it's shatnez, and they'd be laying down on top of shatnez, getting benefit from shatnez. I would say that's also in D'Rabbanan. To which the something very interesting. Big Day Kahuna Kashenheim. The Big Day Kahuna were made of very thick, almost coarse-like, not coarse in terms of abrasive, but a thick type of material. Ki ha do Amar Rav Huna Breid Rav Yoshua, as Rav Huna said in Rav Yoshua, Hai Namta Gamda, this hard felt belt, did Narash, or I should say really just this hard felt, from the city of Narash, Sharia, it's permitted to go ahead and, it's permitted. Look at Rashi, what does that mean? Kashimheim, Ve'enan mischalamin lefichach ein bahem mishum kilayim. So also what the Gemara is suggesting over here is that Lanaisa, the Big Day Kahuna, was of a thicker material, and therefore, remember, what was the whole idea? Why can't you lay on top of kilayim? What was the concern about laying on top of shatnez? That you may come to wrap yourself. The Big Day Kahuna apparently, says the Gemara, were of a tough enough material, thick enough material, that people would not wrap themselves in it. Because of that, the Din D'Rabbanan did not apply. And the Gemara gives an example, like this Gamda, look at Rashi, this Namta, Lavash, Gamda, Kasha, Shari, Ein Ba Mishum Kilayim Dahala, Dunya Delavisha, the Ispe Hana'as Chimum Hu de Isser. So both say apparently, with these thicker materials that one would not come to wrap themselves in, there is no Isser Kilayim. So apparently what Gemara is suggesting is, even if you want to go with the approach that Lemaisa, they slept on top of the Big Day Kahuna, it would still not pose a shatnez problem, because again the Big Day Kahuna were thick, and therefore one would not come to wrap themselves in it. Fine? So the Gemara goes weiter. Tashma, Big Day Kahuna, Hayotze Mehen. So we'll come back to this Big Day Kahuna piece in terms of seeing exactly what they did. Just so you should know, the way the Rambam records it is that they did not sleep with the Big Day Kahuna underneath their heads, but rather again they slept with the Big Day Kahuna next to them. The point the Gemara is just making is, even according to the Mandam, who says they slept with the Big Day Kahuna underneath their heads, apparently you could still avoid any issue of even rabbinic shatnez, because this clothing did not lend itself to wrapping oneself, and therefore there's no concern that one would benefit from shatnez. Okay, says the Gemara, Tashma, Big Day Kahuna, Hayotze Bahen LeMedina, Aser. So also listen to this. So the Big Day Kahuna, if you went outside to the Medina, now I will say Medina over here means outside of the Beis Hamikdash, right? If you leave the Beis Hamikdash in Big Day Kahuna, that is Aser. Says Rashi, the Medina Aser. Why? Shenoig ba derech chol. Because then you're essentially just wearing it as regular clothing, right? Big Day Kahuna is special clothing that was made again for sacrificial service. To go out of the Beis Hamikdash in that clothing represents usage of that clothing in a mundane fashion. It's aser. Oba mikdash, but in the Beis Hamikdash, bein b'shas avoda, bein shelo b'shas avoda, mutter. But when it comes to the Beis Hamikdash, you could wear that clothing during the avoda, during the time of the avoda, and not during the time of the avoda. So I'll say this is very interesting, because here's what's fascinating. We've already established, by the way, that the Big Day Kahuna are the property of the Beis Hamikdash. Right? Remember where we had this sugya? The sugya that we had, remember, is where we had, let's say, the mothers of the Kohanim Gedolim were making their sons clothing, and there was a whole concern: are they going to retain ownership over it, or are they going to fully go ahead and donate it to the Beis Hamikdash? So Big Day Kahuna belongs to the Beis Hamikdash. On the other hand, there's a realization. So therefore, you would say, if you are a purist, you would say, when should Kohanim? It's not just Kohen Gedolim. When should Kohanim wear Big Day Kahuna?
In the Beis service.
In the Beis Hamikdash, but when? Only during sacrificial service. And therefore, in any moment that they are not engaged in avodah, what should they do? They should change. The problem is, of course, that's a huge tircha. It's a huge tircha, and it's not totally realistic, because inevitably, I will say, what's going to happen? Kohanim are going to be wearing clothing when not engaged in sacrificial service. For example, Kohen has to change into his clothing. The amount of time that it takes him to walk from, let's say, we'll call it the Kohanic quarters, right? The Kohanic quarters until the Mizbeach. There are times where, by definition, he's not engaged in sacrificial service. So it's a very unique type of situation. So therefore, the Gemara says you can't wear your big day kahuna outside of the Beis Hamikdash. But when you are in the Beis Hamikdash, you can wear your big day kahuna bein b'shas avoda, bein shelo b'shas avoda mutter. But you can wear it, I will say, when? The entire time. Whether you are doing the avoda, whether you're not doing the avoda, you can wear it. Why? Mipnei shebig day kahuna nitnu lehanos. I will say, for one simple reason, because apparently, again, big day kahuna were given over to the Kohanim to get benefits from. Now, what does it mean, get benefits from? Again, this is a limited benefit. This means benefit that they could wear it, doing the activities of daily living within the Beis Hamikdash itself, but they may not wear them out. So the Gemara says, Shema mina, and indeed learn out that what? So Rabbi say, again, this brings to closure our questions. Remember, again, this whole sugya came up because we were trying to figure out, can Kohanim get benefits from their big day kahuna? And the answer is a tempered yes. What's the tempered yes? They can, in that what? And that they could wear it throughout the day in the Beis Hamikdash, even if what Rabbi say? Even if they are not currently engaged in sacrificial service. See, even again, if they're just walking around the Beis Hamikdash, even if they're just eating, not sacrificial items, but just other items, no matter what they are doing, as long as they're in the confines of the Beis Hamikdash, they are permitted to get benefit from the clothing. The assumption is that during their waking hours, Kohanim are assumed to be engaged in temple service. As such, they are permitted to go anywhere the big day kahuna. When they go to sleep, what do they have to do? They can't put their heads on it, but rather, again, they put it opposite to them. Shmamina, and indeed, this is the halacha. So now the Gemara says, now,
they would sleep in the Beis Hamikdash?
Yeah, they had barracks. They had barracks there. This is your first day. You don't get questions first day. Yeah, at least a week straight and on time. Then you get questions. That's it. It's awesome. Sorry, it's not mine. It's Ari's. I just work here. I just work here.
We all went through it.
Yeah. All right. So and then there's the tar and feathering, but that's a different. All right. So, says the Gemara. Yes, but they did sleep in the Beis Hamikdash. They actually had barracks. Barracks is the wrong word. Barracks sounds too like quarters. Right, I was going to say hotel, but that's too lavish.
Puppies for the mishmar.
No, that's something different. That's just storage spaces for the knife, right? So that's again. But they literally had places to stay in the Beis Hamikdash itself. It's actually interesting. The Gemara says one of the opinions we saw is that they also used to sleep around the Beis Hamoka. Remember, they had a fire chamber. Because again, Kohanim would get cold over the course of their day. So according to many, they used to sleep on the floor of the Beis Hamoka. Okay. So Gemara says, now the Gemara just made a statement over here that what? That Lamaisa, you can't wear the big day kahuna outside of the Beis Hamikdash. So Gemara says, that's true. Rabbi said, listen to this. This is an amazing story. V'hatanya, really amazing story. V'hatanya, we learned that if your friends are not here, you should text them now that they should get here because Chavalton is this. Ubemedina lo v'hatanya, we learned be'esrim v'chamisha b'teves, on the 25th day of Teves, Yom Har Grizim. We're both like, there's something called Megillas Tainus. Megillas Tainus references a whole bunch of days in which we fast on and on which we celebrate as Yamim Tovim. So Megillas Tainus is lost. We only have remnants of it. So there are all these other Yamim Tovim where they would not say Tachanon, so one of these days is the 25th of Teves. What happened on the 25th of Teves? Yom Har Grizim was considered the day of Har Grizim. What are we doing on the day of Har Grizim? I will say, understand, Har Grizim was very important. For us, it was important because, again, that's where the bracha and the klala took place when we entered into Eretz Yisrael. So in the times of the Beis Hamikdash, it was more important because it was the stronghold of of the Kusim, of the Samaritans, right? So, who caused the Jewish people incredible problems. Listen to this. We don't say eulogies on this day, which means it's a Yom Tov. Because what happened on this day? Yom Shebikshu Kusim is based on Alexandrus Mokdon. It was a day in which the Kusim, remember again, we've referenced the Kusim many times. The Kusim were a group that were resettled in Eretz Yisrael by the king of Ashur. There was an outbreak of lions. The Kusim converted, but their conversion was always suspect because they were found to be worshipping idolatry even subsequent to their conversion. Therefore, and later on in history, they became antagonists to the Jewish people. They tried to undermine us in many different ways. So what happens? So this was the day in which the Kusim went to Alexandros Mokdon. So Alexandros Mokdon is Alexander the Macedonian, also known as Alexander the Great. So they went to Alexander the Great. Lachriv, and they said to Alexander, the Jews are trying to rebel against you. So the Kusim were trying to tell Alexander, Jews are rebelling, and they wanted to destroy our temple. And what happens? Alexander gave them permission, gave the Kusim permission to destroy the Beis HaMikdash. What happened? And they told Shimon HaTzadik. So also remember who's Shimon HaTzadik? We know this. Shimon HaTzadik Haya Mishayare Anshe Knesses Hagidola. Right, was a Kohen Gadol, who was also one of the last members of the Men of the Great Assembly. They told Shimon HaTzadik that the Kusim are going to be marching on the Beis HaMikdash. So what happened? What happened? I'm sorry?
Alexander told
No,
him?
somebody told him. No, Alexander didn't tell him. Right, somebody else, whoever told him, he found out. So what happened? Ma'asa lavash bigdei kuna v'nis atif b'bigdei kuna. So Shimon HaTzadik dressed up. You remember he was the Kohen Gadol. He dressed up in his bigdei kuna, and he traveled. Umiyakiri Yisrael imo, and the most important people, the Jewish people, accompanied him. Va'avukos shel or biyadeyan, and they were carrying torches of light. V'chol halayla halalu holchem mitzadzeh. So also, if you can imagine the scene, what's happening? The Kusim are marching from Har Gerizim to Yerushalayim to go and destroy the Beis HaMikdash. The Jews, the delegation led by Shimon HaTzadik, are marching towards Alexander from the other direction. So each are coming from an opposite direction. So what happened? Ad sha'ala amud hashachar, until dawn. Kevan sha'ala amud hashachar amulahem mihalalu. So what happens? Comes the morning, Alexander the Great sees these two camps marching towards him. And what happens? He says to his people, who are these people marching towards us? Amru lo Yehudim shemardu b'cha. They said to Alexander, these are the Jews who rebelled against you. Because remember, the way that the Kusim sold us out is they told Alexander that the Jews have rebelled against you. Again, historically, conquering monarchs don't need all that much evidence to show that people are rebelling against them. So you have the Kusim pledged their allegiance to Alexander. The Jews have not yet pledged their full allegiance to Alexander. We're still a spiritually autonomous people, and therefore Alexander believes them. So they say to Alexander, that's the group who rebelled against you, is marching towards you. Kevan shegia la Antipras, we'll say this is wild. When they got to Antipras, Zarcha Chama Upaga Zebazeh. So what happens? They got to Antipras, and what happens, Rabbi? If you can imagine this scene, the Kusim and the Jews converge upon Alexander exactly at the same moment. Kevan Shera'a l'Shimon HaTzadik, Rabbi, say, get ready. When Alexander the Great, now remember, understand, Alexander the Great, in his heyday, was the most powerful man on the face of the earth. That's not an exaggeration. He was the most powerful man on the face of the earth. What happens? When he saw Shimon HaTzadik, Yorad Memer Kavto, he got off his chariot, V'hishtachave lefanov. Can you imagine this? Alexander the Great got off his chariot and bowed down before Shimon HaTzadik. Amru lo. So his advisors, right, his men are floored at this. Melech gadol kemoscha yishtachave leYehudizu. You're the king. You're not just the king. You're the most powerful monarch on the face of the earth, and you're bowing down in front of this Jew. Listen, Alexander the Great said, Amru lahem diyokno shalzeh minatzeches lefanai bebeis milchamti. Alexander the Great says, whenever I go to war, I'm always accompanied by an angel. And the angel looks just like this man. That's quite amazing. So again, the Maharsha says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created this nation. Again, I'll say, you should just understand, Klal Gadol is, people who are matzliach in ridiculous ways, that only comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You only become an Alexander the Great when God is on your side. It doesn't necessarily mean you're a good person, but it means that clearly God is on your side. So Alexander the Great realizes that his success is very much because the divine is on his side. And he says, when I went out to war, there's an angel. and the angel looks like Shimon HaTzadik. I've seen this man's face in all of my battles. He gets up and he bows down before him. Amar lahem lama basem. So after he gets up, he says, "No, why are you here?" Says to Shimon HaTzadik, "Why are you here?" Amru efshar bayishim spalin bo alecha va'al malchusecha shlo techarav yitaucha ovdei kochavim lachrivo. So it says Shimon HaTzadik says to Alexander the Great, "Listen, the house in which we daven for you and we daven for you," says to say again, general happens to be Alexander. Alexander was a benevolent ruler to the Jews. The proof to that is what? Right? Many Jews throughout the ages, you ever wonder how the name Alexander has entered into the Jewish name lexicon? Right? It's not exactly. It's not a biblical name. Right? It's not a Jewish name. It's not a Jewish name at all. It's the name of a Gentile monarch. Jews had incredible hakaras hatov to Alexander the Great because he was benevolent. He allowed Eretz Yisrael to exist on its own. He allowed spiritual autonomy. He even allowed governmental autonomy to a certain. Remember, when do things go south? Right? When Alexander the Great dies. Remember, again, it's a little bit of history over here. When Alexander the Great dies, there's a huge power vacuum. And because he doesn't leave an heir. So there are 4 generals. For Alexander the Great's 4 generals divide up his massive empire. One of his generals happens to be a man by the name of Antioch, also known as Antiochus, who takes over the area of the Syrian Greek Empire. That's the general, that's the Antiochus of the Hanukkah story. Pre-Hanukkah, things weren't great. I'm saying it wasn't like the heyday of the Jewish people, but things were good. Things were peaceful. There was no ridiculous taxation. There was no trying to squeeze every penny out of the Jewish. Things were normal. Jewish society thrived. Alexander dies. So they said to Alexander, Shimon HaTzadik says, "We daven for you every single day in our Beis Hamikdash, right? We pray for you. Again, we say the tefillah for the Memshal, the tefillah for the government every single day. The home in which we daven for you, you're going to allow to be destroyed." Amar lahem mi halalu. So Alexander then turns to the other group and he says to this other group, "No, who are you?" Alexander says, "Who are the people who want to destroy the temple?" Amar lo kusim halalu she'omdim lefanecha. So Shimon HaTzadik says, "Funny you should ask. Right? It happens to be the people who want to destroy the Beis Hamikdash is this other group standing right over here. Amar lahem harehem misurim biyadeichem." So Alexander will say, this is an amazing reversal. Again, Alexander says, "Okay, the kusim are yours to do with as you want." Right, exactly. A total 180. The kusim are marching on Yerushalayim to destroy it because Alexander the Great gave them permission. Now he has total respect for Shimon HaTzadik. Gives the Jews the kusim. What do the kusim do? Well, I'll say this is a bit brutal. Miyad nokvum bakvem. They pierced the heels of the kusim. Utilaam benzin vesusim susayim, and tied them to the tails of their horses. Vayumegarin osa alakosim valabarnikim, and dragged them across the thorns and the thistles. Ad sheikil hagrizim, until they reached Hagrizim. Now, both say Hagrizim was essentially the harabayis of the kusim. That was the temple mount of the kusim. What did they do? Kevan sheigil hagrizim charshua vizaruha krishin kederach shebikshu laasos beis lebeis Elokeinu. When they got to Har Hagrizim, they destroyed the Kusi temple and literally plowed and sowed Har Hagrizim with vetch. Vetch is animal feed. So they totally destroyed the Kusi temple and plowed the field under it. The Jews did this. Va'osa hayom aso yom tov. And that day they made into a Yom Tov. That was the day when we were saved from the Kusi threat and ultimately again destroyed the Kusi temple. I will say, understand, it's harsh, but the truth is the Jews clearly felt that they had to make a point. To go ahead and let the Kusim go back home. It's interesting. There's a time for Shalom. We've often mentioned the best way to make Shalom is how? The best way to make Shalom is to beat your enemies into submission. That's the best shalom. The best peace comes from strength, not from words. Right? Show your enemies that you can beat them down to the ground, and maybe even beat them down to the ground a little bit, and then you can say afterwards, let's be friends. Let's learn to coexist. If you say let's learn to coexist and you don't do anything to neutralize your threat, your enemy will be back at your doorstep before you even know what happens. So you have to neutralize the kusim. And yes, they make a very dramatic example, and therefore this day became a Yom Tov. So also I can remember, why did we quote this story? So again, it's a fascinating Raisa. But why is it here? Because what happened? Shimon HaTzadik wore Big Day Kahuna outside of the Beis HaMikdash. So don't tell me you can't do it. He wore Big Day Kahuna. So the Gemara gives 2 answers. So some say it doesn't literally mean he didn't literally wear bigdei kuna. What did he wear? He wore clothing that could have been the bigdei kuna. So we'll say we've seen this before already. That kohanim very often, especially wealthy kohanim, had kind of like bigdei kuna replicas, like their own wardrobe that looked like bigdei kuna, but was not sanctified as bigdei kuna. So possibility number one is he wore clothing that looked like bigdei kuna, but wasn't actual bigdei kuna. Or the second answer, which I think is much more powerful, v'bay seimha eis lasos lashem efaros sarasecha. The other opinion I will say is what? He did wear bigdei kuna. How can you wear bigdei kuna outside of the Beis Hamikdash? I will say eis lasos lashem efaros sarasecha. Chazal translate to mean there is a time where you have to do things for God, and doing things for God sometimes requires an annulment of the very precepts of the Torah. In other words, sometimes dramatic situations require dramatic action. So, right, you don't normally wear big tikkun outside of the Beis Hamikdash. This was an exception. Shimon HaTzadik felt that he had to make a point, and that point was only made by wearing the big tikkun out, and that was for the salvation of the Jewish people, and therefore was permitted. Next, Chazan HaKnesses no tel Sefer Torah. So, also, if you remember again, the Mishnah described the process of Kriyas HaTorah in the Beis Hamikdash. What happened? The Chazan HaKnesses, who was the Shamish took the Sefer, he gave it to the Rosh HaKnesses, to the Gabbai to the Skan, and the Skan to the Kohen Gadol. So what do you see from here? Shmanina cholkin kavod letalmid b'makom harav. Rabbi say, what do you see from here? That you are permitted to go ahead and give honor to the student in the presence of the Rebbe. So Rabbi say, there's a big machlokes about this. In general, if you can give kavod to a Talmud where his Rebbe is present, because according to some, giving kavod to the Talmud in the presence of the Rebbe represents a lessening of the kavod of the Rebbe. So the Gemara says, you see from here that you can give kavod to the Talmud in front of the Rebbe. You say, what does this refer to? We're giving kavod to the Sgan in front of the Kohen Gadol. So you see from here that you can give kavod to the Talmud in front of the Rebbe. To which the Gemara says, no, not necessarily. Amar Abaye, kula mishum kavodo the Kohen Gadol. The truth is no. All of this is considered to be covered for the Kohen Gadol. Why? Because once again, there's a whole procession, there's a whole process over here. All of this, it's a build-up, and it's a dramatic build-up, and it's all considered covered by the Kohen Gadol. The Kohen Gadol all made, and what happens? The Kohen Gadol stands up. The Kohen Gadol stands up to receive the Torah. So the Gemara says, Michlal shu yoshet. Now, also the fact that it says that the Kohen Gadol stands up indicates to us what? That he apparently was sitting. Really? But we learned. Ein yeshiva ba'azara ela l'malchei beis David bilvad. And both say there's only one person who could go ahead and sit in the Azar in the courtyard of the Beis Hamikdash, and that is kings of Davidic descent. Only kings of Davidic descent are permitted to go ahead and sit in the courtyard of the Beis Hamikdash. Everyone else must stand. Shne'emar vayavo hamelech David vayashav lifnei Hashem kedam Rav Chisda. So Rabbi says, how could it be that the Kohen Gadol is sitting? Kedam Rav Chisda be'ezras noshim. Oh, where Rabbi says it's all taking place? This is taking place in what we call the Ezras Noshim. So what's the Ezras Noshim? The Ezras Noshim, we call it the women's section, although it wasn't really the women's. The women could be there also, but this is the outer courtyard. So again, remember, we'll say if you have your Beis Hamikdash picture, you can see over here this big area over here. This is called the Ezras Noshim. So the reading of the Torah on Yom Kippur was taking place over here in this Ezras Noshim. So the Gemara says the following: where was Rav Chisda's original statement made? It was made concerning this. Or I should say, it was made concerning this question. Desanya, Heichan Korin Bo, where do we read? Where does the Torah reading take place on Yom Kippur? Ba'azara, in the courtyard. Rebbe Lazar ben Yaakov Omer, B'harabayis, Shne'emar, Vayikra Bo lifnei harachol asher lifnei sharamayim. V'amar Rav Chisda be'ezras noshim. So Rabbi again, halacha l'maisa, we say that this reading of the Torah on Yom Kippur took place in the Ezras Noshim. And that's why, again, even if you want to be medayik in the words and say that the Kohen Gadol was sitting, that's okay, because one is permitted to sit in the Ezras Noshim. Fine. So the Gemara now quotes a couple of psukim regarding this. Vayivarich Ezra es Hashem ha'elokim ha'gadol. Ezra blessed Hashem the great God. My Gadol, what does that mean, Gadol? So the Gemara says, Amarav Yosef, Amarav, Shegidlo b'Shem HaMaforash. It means that Ezra recited the Shem HaMaforash. Now, both say again, what's the Shem HaMaforash? Look at Rashi over here. Rashi says, Vayivarich Ezra. No Rashi, I'm sorry. So we'll see it. Shem HaMaforash means Yud Kei Vav Kei. That's when Ezra recited the bracha. He recited the bracha and he enunciated the letters of this name. So the Gemara says, Rav Gidel Omer, Baruch Hashem Elokei Yisrael, min ha'olam v'ad ha'olam. On the other end, Rav Gidl says, no, what does it mean? That he blessed HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Elokim HaGodol. HaGodol means that after he recited the name of Hashem, everyone else responded, blessed is the name of Hashem, the God of Israel, min ha'olam v'ad ha'olam, from this world to the next. Amrli Abayil Rav Dimi, v'dilma shegidlo b'shem ha'maforosh. But maybe it's like we originally said before, that he said actually Yud Kei Vav Kei. Amrli ein omrim shem ha'maforosh bigvulim. Rabosa, you can't say the name of Hashem, you can't articulate the ineffable name Yud Kei Vav Kei outside of the Beis Hamikdash. Rabosa, what does it mean outside of the Beis Hamikdash? Ezra is standing in the Ezras Nashim. Ezra standing in the Ezras Nashim when this takes place. So, and yet the Gemara calls that what? Outside of the Beis Hamikdash. Now remember, the whole reason why this is all coming up is because what are we trying to show? That if the Kohen Gadol was sitting, where could you possibly be sitting within the Beis Hamikdash compound, but yet not be in the Beis Hamikdash, so to speak? And now we've established that what? That's the Ezras Nashim. Just like again, Ezra couldn't articulate the name of the Shema Meforosh and the Ezras Nashim, so that the Kohen Gadol be able to sit in the Ezras Nashim. So Mar says, "V'lo, is that true and not?" V'hoksiv vayamod Ezra sofer al migdal eitz asher asu ledavar. But yet the pasuk says that Ezra sofer stood on the platform of wood that they built for this matter. For the Amar of Gidlo says, what is this matter? What did they do? Shegidlo b'shem ha'meforash. And yet, what did Ezra do from this platform? Ezra went ahead and articulated, he enunciated the divine name of Hashem. To which the Gemara says, you're right, he did it, but Hora'as Sha'a Haisa. Rabbi say it was a temporary measure. Hora'as Sha'a means that it was an exception. There was apparently, again, Rabbi say, just like we saw before, that according to one opinion, Shimon HaTzadik wore the big day kahuna outside of the Beis HaMikdash. Because it was Hara'ah Shah, it was an extenuating circumstance. So too the Gemara suggests that the blessing of Ezra, the fact that Ezra blessed the people with the Shem HaMeforsh and actually articulated that name, was also a Hara'ah Shah, was a dispensation. I will say why Ezra did that, we'll discuss. Meaning what was the emergency? What was the major situation that caused that? We'll get to that. So the Gemara says Vaiter. Vayitzaku el Hashem Elokim b'kol gadol. They called out to Hashem, their God, with a great voice. So we'll say again, the Gemara once again over here is quoting from Nehemiah. They called out to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in a great voice. What does that mean? So the Gemara says, My Omer Rav, V'itim Rav also listen to this. So now, let's imagine this scene. So this is now in the Navi Nehemiah. The Jewish people are calling out in a state of distress. So now the Gemara is going to say, what's the distress? What's the problem? I'll say, it's another amazing Gemara. So Omer Rav, V'itim Rav Yochanan, bye. Bye means oi. Woe to us. So the Gemara says, Hainu hai, listen to this. So what are they crying out about? Hainu hai, the achreve lemikdasha, because this thing that destroyed the Beis HaMikdash, v'kalye lehechale, and laid ruin to the Heichal, v'katlinu lekulu tzadike, and killed all the tzadikim, va'aglinu liyisrael me'arehum, and caused the Jewish people to be exiled from their land. Va'adayin meraked beinon klum. Right? I'm sorry, beinon. And yet it still dances among us. So we'll say, what are they talking about? The Yetzer Hara for Avodah Zarah. Right? Take a look at Rashi. Rashi says, Hayda achrevei labeis hamikdash, mevakshin rachlim sheim strabiyadam Yetzer Hara shal Avodah comes. So we'll say here, under Nehemiah, the Jews are lamenting, we have suffered so much because of the sin of idolatry. Again, we have worshipped idolatry. And because of that sin, because of that Yetzer Hara, everything has been destroyed. We've lost the Beis HaMikdash. Remember, this is already now Second Temple era. But the point is, they're lamenting the fact about all we've lost because of Avodah Zarah. All the people that have been killed because of Avodah Zarah. And yet, despite it all, the Yetzer Hara for Avodah Zarah is mamish doing the Hora right here. It is dancing among us. It's still here. So they say to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Yahavise lan. So the Gemara says, let me say that. Klum Yahavise lan. El lekabule be'egra. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, why did you give us this Yetzer Hara? You gave us this Yetzer Hara so we should get reward. I will say, what does that mean? HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us the Yetzer Hara not because he wants to punish us, because again, I will say, success in life is only meaningful if you have to overcome challenge. If there's no challenge, then there's no real success. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you gave us the Yetzer Hara of Avodah Zarah, so that we should find the strength, muster the strength to overcome it. And when we overcome it, then what happens? we get reward, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's not working, right? We're succumbing to it. So we have an idea. So the Gemara says, lo ihu ba'inan, v'lo agri ba'inan. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you know what, they're going to make you a deal. We're going to make you a deal. You keep the challenge, and you could also keep the reward, right? So let's call it even, right? Don't test us, don't give us meaning. What the Jew, this is desperation. This is absolute desperation. We can't overcome the Yetzer Hara of Avodah Zarah. So if you look back at that Rashi for just a moment, Rashi says over here, "Hayda achrei lebeis hamikdash." What are they davening for? Maybe what is the request? Rashi says, "Mevakshin rachamim sheyimsar biyadam Yetzer Hara shel avodas kochavim." What they are asking is for God to give them the power to vanquish the Yetzer Hara for idolatry. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, remove the Yetzer Hara for idolatry. Okay? So what they're saying is, again, we recognize why you give it to us. We can't overcome it. We know we'll lose out on a whole bunch of reward. It's okay, you know what? We're going to be mevater. We're willing to forego the reward, just get rid of the Yetzer Hara. We'll say, this is amazing. Nafalahu piska mirakia. So we'll say, what happens? A note fell down from Shamayim. Imagine this. The Havikasav Ba, one word, MS. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, true. You're right. MS. What you're saying is MS. Amar Rav Chanina. Rav Chanina suggests as an aside, Shma mina chosmo shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu MS. So Rabbosai, first of all, we see from here that what? The signature of God is MS. In other words, HaKadosh Baruch Hu left them is, from the desk of God. From the desk of God, God. Right? MS. You know what? You're saying good. You're saying good. I have Rachmanas and you my children. I recognize you can't overcome this Yetzer Hara. You're right. So what did they do? Let's listen to this. Very exciting. Osivo patani satlas in yomin. They fasted for 3 days. Utlasa lelusen 3 nights. Masrua nehele. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave them control over the Yetzer Hara for Avodah Zarah. I will say, how exactly do you get control over the Avodah Zarah for Yetzer Hara? Listen, this is wild. So what happens? Nafak asa kiguria dinura mibeis kajakader. So we'll say after 3 days and 3 nights, they are on the level to conquer and subdue the Yetzer Hara for Avodah Zarah. What happens? So a fiery lion jumps out from the Kodesh HaKadosh. Rabbi say they're looking right at the Yetzer Hara of Avodah Zarah. It's just interesting, by the way, that the Yetzer Hara for Avodah Zarah jumps out of the Kodesh HaKadoshim. So it tells you something very profound. That the Yetzer Hara for Avodah Zarah, if channeled, what is the Yetzer Hara for Avodah Zarah? It comes from a pure place. It comes from a desire to connect to something bigger than yourself. If you channel and you sublimate that Yetzer Hara in the correct way, you can become an incredible Avodah Hashem. That's what I will say. If you look historically, some of the greatest people came out from the greatest generations of Avodah Zarah. The paradigmatic example of this is Avram Avinu, right? Avram Avinu came from Terech Avei, came from an incredible Oved Avodah Zarah. Avram Avinu learned to channel the power of Avodah Zarah and to sublimate and to channel it into the service of God. So the fiery lion of Yetzer Hara emerges from the Kodesh HaKadoshim. What happens? Amar Lahu Navi the Yisrael Hainu Yitzra Davodas Kochavim. So Nehemiah told them, that's it. So as you can imagine, everybody's standing there. I mean, can you imagine for a moment, like, what exactly do you do? Right? So now I'm standing there. The fiery lion comes out of the Kodesh HaKadoshim. What is this? So Nehemiah says, that's it. That's the Yetzer Hara of Avodah Zarah. So what happens? Shneimar Vayomer Zos Harisha. What happens? That's the Risha. That's the evil one. So we'll say, what do they do? So what do? You got to capture it. So they wrestle it. Bahadit tafsu alei ishtamit bein se mimazye. So we'll say, as they are wrestling the fiery line of Yetzer Hara, what happens? One of the hairs of its mane fell off. The most of the Mashal says, what is one of the hairs of the mane? That meaning, we'll say, as much as they're going to vanquish the Yetzer Hara of Avodah Zarah, a little bit got away. One hair of the mane got away. The Rama Kala. Now we'll say, as they're wrestling down the fiery line of Avodah Zarah, it lets out a cry because now it's kiviyachol, it's in pain. And what happens? And va'azal kala arba mea parsi. The voice, the cry extends 400 parsos. Amru heichi navid. What should we do? Dilma chas shal merachami alei min shamaya. So we'll say the concern was that if we just wrestle the Avodah Zarah, the Yetzer Hara for Avodah Zarah down to the ground, it's going to cry out, and what's going to happen? God may hear its cries of pain. HaKadosh Baruch Hu may have rachmanus on the fire line of Yitzhar. So what should we do? Amr lehu Navi. So the Navi said to him, Shajua b'dura de'avra, v'chafyua lepumi ba'avra. Throw it into a lead container and cover it with a lead covering. Apparently, lead absorbs sound very well. So again, essentially, put it in lead, and that'll drown out the sound. De'avra mishiv sha'iv kola, because lead absorbs sound. Shne emar vayomer zos harasha vayashlech ose al tocha eva vayashlech es even haoferes apia. He said, "This is the risha. This is the evil one. This is Yitzhar of all the zara." They threw it into an eva, and they put a stone of lead on top of it. Amru. So we'll say, so now this is the story of how they vanquished the Yitzhar of all the zara. We'll say this is why to this day we often read the Nevi'im and we read how people struggle with Avodah Zarah, and for the life of us, we can't understand how someone could be so drawn to a fashtunkina idol. It doesn't make any sense to us. And the reason it doesn't make sense to us is because, again, Chazal removed that Yitzhar. Yes, there are little remnants of that. There's the hair from the mane that still exists, but it's gone. So the Gemara says the following. Amru hoil ve'esratzonhu niboi rachame ayitzra da'avera. So we'll say now, the rabbis realized that they were on a roll, right? Now this is pretty big stuff. We just finished off the Yitzhar for Avodah Zarah. So you know what? What's next on our list, on our to-do list? Let's take care of the Yitzhar for immorality. Let's go ahead and take care of the Yitzhar for immorality. So the Gemara says, what should we do? So the Gemara says, Bo'u rachame, v'amsar biyadayu. The rabbis davened again, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu once again gave them control, took away the Yitzhar for immorality. Amr lehu. So as the Yitzhar for immorality was being conquered by the rabbis, he said to them, just get ready. Chazu di'ikatlisu le lahu kalya alma. So the Yitzhar of immorality, as he's getting ready to be slaughtered by the rabbi, says, just beware, if you slaughter me, you will destroy the world. You will destroy the world. So they said, you know what? That's a pretty serious threat. Let's take it under advisement. Mm-hmm. So what did they do? Kalya alma, Chavshua tlasa yomi. So Rabbi say, you know what? So what do? They decide before we go ahead and destroy the Yitzhar for immorality. So they kept him in jail. They incarcerated him for 3 days, or it for 3 days. Let's see what happens to the world when he's not there. So the Gemara says, Ubo bi'asa bas Yoma b'chol Eretz Yisrael v'lo ishtachach. And what happens? They tried to find fresh eggs in all of Eretz Yisrael, and they couldn't find fresh eggs. Look at Rashi for just a moment. Rashi says, bi'asa bas Yoma, Beitza hanolda bol bayom. So they couldn't find an egg that was laid that day. Shepasak hachimum mena me'ayim va'afilu osan she'ibra tarnagolas kvara'inun mishpash me'as. So I'll say, what it means is, when they removed that Yitzhara, there was not even a desire for basic procreation. I will say, remember, you have to understand something. All Yitzharas are not inherently evil. Yitzhara represents the corruption of what could normally be a very important and good drive. So just like, again, the Yitzhara for Avodah Zarah comes out of the Kodesh HaKadoshim because it represents at its core a desire to connect to the divine. It's just Avodah Zarah is taking the wrong approach to that. Immorality represents the basic desire for procreation, the basic desire for real intimate connection. When you remove that Yitzhara, you remove everything along with it, along with the basic desire for procreation. So there are no eggs. And the Gemara should see that as an example. No eggs to be found in Eretz Yisrael. What happens? Amru heichi navi. So also now the rabbis had a problem. What's the issue? What should we do? Nakdele, if we destroy the Yitzhara for immorality, it's clear, kalye alma. It's clear that what? The world won't be able to exist. So maybe you'll say that we should ask for partial divine compassion. I will say, what does that mean, partial divine compassion? Look at Rashi. Lepalga, sholet ba'adam lizakik liishto v'lo la'acheres. So maybe we should daven like this. We want the man to desire his wife. That's what we want. If the man doesn't desire his wife, that's big tsaros. So why don't we say that let the Yitzhara for arayos be partially intact, that a man should desire his wife but shouldn't desire anyone else. So he says something very interesting. Palga berakia lo yahavi. God doesn't fulfill partial requests. Mm-hmm. And I will say, what does that mean? What that means is that, come on, you've got to be a big boy, right? Either we're going to destroy this Yitzhara, or it's going to remain intact. We God created it, and we're going to struggle with it. But you can't start asking God, give me a Yetzer Hara for my wife, but not a Yetzer Hara for this one, and not a Yetzer Hara for that one. God doesn't work that way. This is not a smorgasbord, right? This is not a morality smorgasbord. I'll take 2 of that, 1 of that, none of that. Either it's going to be here or it's not going to be here. So I will say, what did they do? This is amazing. So the Gemara says, Kachlinhu le'enei v'shafkos. So I'll say, what did they do? Literally translated, it means they blinded the Yetzer Hara for Arayos, and then they let him go. So I'll say, what it means is, in some way, they damaged him. So they had to let him go because he was right. The world needs him. But what did they do before they let him go? They damaged him. They blinded him. I will say, what does that mean? Somehow they handicapped him. Va'ahanile, and I will say, listen to this. So the handicapping of the Yetzer Hara worked. How does it work? Dilo migri be leinish bikri vase. I will say, how did it work? And I will say, interestingly enough, one thing we don't desire, normal people don't desire, and that's their immediate relatives, right? Normal people don't desire incest. They may desire everything else under the sun, but not incest. Why? Now again, the Torah itself prohibits those unions. When the Torah prohibits something, it means that HaKadosh Baruch Hu realizes that man has a natural desire for it. So why don't normal people feel that desire for incest? And the answer is because Chazal were successful in at least removing that element of the Yetzer Hara for immorality. In the Eretz Yisrael, they had a different version of this discussion. Rav Gidel Amar, Godol Shegodlo B'Shem Maforish. I will say, this is going back to what happened with Ezra. What did Ezra do? He went ahead, Godlo, he literally made God great by uttering the Shema Maforish. Rav Masna says, Hakel, Hagodol, Hagibor, Vahanora. The Harav Masya, Mati Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. Rav Masna supports Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. What does Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi say? I will say another amazing Gemara. Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. Lamani Kran Shman Anshi Knesses Hagadola. Why are the men of the Great Assembly called great? Why are they called great? So the Gemara says, Shech Zira Atrali Yoshna, because they returned the crown. They returned the crown to its former glory. How so? Both say, listen to this. Asa Moshe Amar Hakel Hagodol Hagibar V'Hanor. Both say, when Moshe Rabbeinu praised HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he praised God with all these adjectives: Hakel, God; Godol, great; Gibor, strong; Nora, awesome. Asa Yirmiyah V'Amar Nachrim Mekarkarin. Others say Merakdin Behechalo. So I'll say Yirmiyahu, remember, was the Navi of the destruction. He sees the Churban Beis HaMikdash, and he says what? How can you, the Nachrim, the Gentiles, are dancing or croaking in the Beis HaMikdash, right? They're dancing, they're celebrating in our Beis HaMikdash. Ayeno Rosav, where is God's awesomeness? Where is God's awesomeness? Lo Amar Nora. Yirmiyahu took Nora off the list. Asa Daniel came along. Amar Nachrim Mishtabdim Bivanav. The Nachrim, the non-Jews, are what? Are literally enslaving his children. Ayeh Gvurosav. Where is God's strength? Lo Amar Gibor. So both say Yirmiyahu knocks off Nora. Daniel knocks off Gibor. And what happens? Asu Inhu. The Anshe Knesset Gadol come along and they say, Adirabah. No, just the opposite. Zohi Gvuros. You know what the strength is? Zohi Gvuros Gvuroso. Shekovish Es Yisro. Shenosin Erech Apayim L'Rishoim. Both you know what the greatest strength of God is? The greatest strength of God is in His patience. That even though the Gentiles go ahead and defile His Beis HaMikdash, He's patient with them and allows them to try to do tshuva. The greatest manifestation of strength is not the flexing of your muscles. The greatest manifestation of strength is restraint. Ezehu Gibor Hakovesh Es Yitzro. So the Anshe Knesset HaGadolos say, no, you think God's passivity is a form of weakness. It's the ultimate form of strength. What happens? What's the awesomeness of God? And you want to see the awesomeness of God? The awesomeness of God is expressed in the fact that we are still here. Because how else can you explain the existence of the Jewish people among all of the nations? So therefore, I will say the Anshe Knesset HaGadolah went ahead and reinstituted that which Moshe Rabbeinu said: Godel, Gibor, and Nora. V'Rabbanan heichi avdiachi v'akri takanta the takin Moshe. So I will say, how were Yirmiyahu and Daniel able to go ahead and detract from the praise that was created, that was concretized by Moshe Rabbeinu? Listen, this I will say is amazing. Amar Rabbi Elazar mitoch sheyodin sheba Kadosh Baruch Hu sha'amitihu lefichach lo kizvubo. So I will say, going back to what we learned before, Yirmiyahu and Daniel realized that if there's one thing that Kadosh Baruch Hu wants more than anything, what's God's signet? MS. And therefore, again, God would not want us to say something that appears to be false. Therefore, to call God Gibor when he's not flexing his strength, to call him Nora when his children are being enslaved, they felt would be an affront to HaKadosh Baruch Hu because it doesn't look true. And because HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves emes, he would have no problem if we took away these adjectives. Anshe Knesset Gadol will come along and say, I'm sorry, Daniel, I'm sorry, Yirmiyahu, you've misunderstood the strength and the greatness of God. The strength is not expressed in the flexing of muscles. Divine strength is often expressed in restraint, giving people an opportunity for tshuva. The greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is often not expressed in the fact that we have tranquil lives, but it's expressed in the fact that that we are still here despite all of our suffering. Therefore, they reinstituted the praise that was originally instituted by Moshe Rabbeinu. All right, we'll say, stop over here.